In our top stories tonight, authorities gear up to vaccinate the elderly and those with NCDs. More than 100 COVID-19 deaths recorded in Barbados. Parliamentarians debate anti-corruption legislation. And in sports, Kieron Pollard asks for patience for bubble-fatigued Windies players.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC NewsNight, starting now.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Broom. Thank you so much for joining us. We start with this story. The number of COVID-19 deaths in Barbados has now surpassed 100. 3 people died yesterday, bringing the total number who've succumbed to the deadly disease to 101. A 59-year-old woman and an 88-year-old man died in the Accident and Emergency Department of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. They were unvaccinated. Additionally, a 76-year-old man died at Harrison's Point Isolation Facility. He was unvaccinated. Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, has extended sincere condolences to the family and friends of the deceased. Well, there's a suggestion opposition politics and silly season rhetoric are undermining the stability of this country. This from Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley as she lamented the constant attacks and criticisms from some political players on the approaches by government to handling the COVID-19 pandemic.
We therefore have said that, look, you either take the jab or you take the test regularly, and we make sure that we can create that safe environment for the people, especially our elderly people, especially our people who are sick. And you know, I'm asking myself, if we can't agree on this in this country, what is it that's really going on? Because I don't believe that the opposition have malice in the heart. But I believe that something has happened that would cause them to want to pick at these kinds of things. And what is it? It's clearly the belief that we are in a silly season.
The Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry has responded to Prime Minister Motley's announcement about the creation of safe zones. President Anthony Branker says the chamber is happy about the announcement, but he notes there are some aspects which need clarification.
The Chamber is quite pleased to see that we have made some progress towards safeguarding Barbadians and visitors alike with the creation of safe zones. However, we are anxious to understand the logistics behind the safe zones. We are anxious to hear from the Ministry of Health how the safe zones will indeed operate and who carries the cost for these safe zones and the testing that will happen in the safe zones.
Meanwhile, plans to set up the safe zones across the island have been met with mixed reaction by the public.
And if it makes people get vaccinated, then it's a good thing, because I think that we should get vaccinated to help to fight the coronavirus.
If they don't want mandatory vaccinations, there's got to be some way to find out, to protect each other.
My understanding of it is that those people who have already had their vaccinations are able to have access to these zones as opposed to those who haven't. It therefore provides an incentive for those who haven't to get their vaccinations, and for those who already got their vaccinations to feel very excited that they've done so.
Don't have a problem with it. It's a good idea, and everyone should think about it.
I don't really think it's a good idea, but to each his own, because the vaccine won't stop you from contracting the virus or spreading it, so it really don't matter.
As the COVID-19 virus continues to spread in communities, the National United Society of the Blind is concerned about its members isolating at some of the facilities, as all healthcare workers may not be equipped to deal with the visually impaired. Public Relations Officer of the organization, Alinda Brathwaite, says touch remains the blind's connection to the world, even in a pandemic.
We have not had any of our members come down with the virus so far, thankfully. However, it is a matter of concern that the health authorities may not be sufficiently trained. When you're isolated, and of course you're visually impaired, and as I said before, the touch factor is a main thing. We would like to know that the authorities will be able to have the sighted guide techniques that are required to guide a blind person around an area.
She adds, along with training, infrastructure could also be an issue.
Obviously, if there are markers on the floor, like they are in supermarkets and stuff, we will not see those markers. So they would have to be like something that would be raised, or maybe a rough surface that we can say, okay, well, we're not supposed to be in this area. And those are the things that we look at.
The disabled community has welcomed the use of home isolation as it allows those living with disabilities to stay within their environment, but unfortunately says it may not always be feasible as they do not all live alone. In other news now, another effort is underway to stamp out corruption in Barbados. The amended Prevention of Corruption Act was brought back to Parliament today after failing to get support in the Senate last year. Senators were not in favor of the exclusion of judges from scrutiny and possible prosecution. In reintroducing the bill today, Attorney General Dale Marshall said government had committed in its manifesto to rooting out corruption as it's a stain on society. He says a suite of legislation will put Barbados in a good position going forward to address acts of corruption. He believes the wider range of fines and imprisonment terms will act as a deterrent.
I have no difficulty in saying to the world, really, that Barbados adopts as part of its law the UN Convention on Corruption. It is at this point, it is the most thorough, the most comprehensive global treaty that deals with the issue of corruption, and it is commended very, very highly by the Commonwealth Secretariat. So, Mr. Speaker, there's work to be done. We are passing the law today. It will go to the Senate very shortly, and I expect that they will pass it. But once this is finished, we have to embrace the other pieces of legislation that are going to be required to complete the suite. And then that is when the hard work begins, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Marshall is assuring Barbadians who've expressed disappointment no one has been charged with corruption. The process is continuing. In his contribution, Leader of the Opposition, Bishop Joseph Atherley, says the Barbados Labour Party, years after winning the government and despite the promises, has failed to address corruption.
When things like these go down, the perception is birthed in the bosom and minds of people that there is corruption. And as a parliament, as a group of lawmakers, we have to treat to the reality as well as the perception of corruption.
Bishop Atherley has also reiterated a call for the creation of a post of a contractor general in Barbados. The Barbados Light and Power Company is explaining why residents in some northern communities were without electricity on 2 occasions yesterday. Some customers were without power for hours. BL&P Communications Coordinator Jennifer Blackman has been talking about what happened and how the company responded.
Yesterday morning at approximately 10:35 a.m., a fault occurred on our transmission network, resulting in a loss of supply to several districts in the north of the island. Efforts to restore electricity commenced immediately, and communities received power again at varying times. Full restoration to all customers was accomplished at 2:22 p.m. Our teams commenced their investigation immediately into the cause of the fault, and crews worked well into the evening to resolve the matter. At about 8:15 p.m., we initiated a controlled shutdown, which again affected customers for about 10 minutes.
Health officials are getting ready for an all-out push to get the elderly and people with chronic non-communicable diseases vaccinated. This from co-coordinator of the national program, Dr. Elizabeth Ferdinand, who also says overall there was a slight fall-off in the number of people coming out for the jab in the last week. People and some not so old with chronic non-communicable diseases make up the majority of those dying over the last month as the Delta variant continues to affect the island. And in a press conference last night, Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley said, along with trying to get more people vaccinated, the focus will be on that vulnerable group. Now, co-coordinator of the national program, Dr. Elizabeth Ferdinand, says they're preparing for that push, which should start in the coming days.
We have a list of all those who are vaccinated. And so we're going to compare that with the census or the electoral list, to look at the people, especially those over 70, who have not been vaccinated. And then when we get that number together, we will be able to target them individually.
She explains how it will work.
It will mean a lot of legwork, footwork, calling, emailing, letters going out, that sort of thing. It's going to be hard on us, but we're willing to do it because this is our country and our people. So we are going to do that. We're starting from today. We've started working on the lists, getting the people together, identifying them in districts.
Dr. Ferdinand says the private doctors will come on board to continue the work with the shut-ins and those with the NCDs. As it relates to overall numbers now, Dr. Ferdinand says the response continues to be moderate.
Starting in the beginning of September, week by week, we saw a gradual increase from about 5,000 going up to 5,500 and then up to 6,800. And then in the middle of the last 3 weeks, we have been really going and pushing into the communities, putting extra sites all over the island. And we've seen an increase up to 10,600 and then 10,800 for the week. But last week we dropped a bit to 8,233.
The National Co-Coordinator says they're distinctly concerned about the under-18s who are testing positive at a far higher rate than before. She says 3,438 children between 12 and 14 have taken the jab, along with 5,456 of those 15 to 18. That's an overall total of 8,895 people between the ages of 12 and 18 who were vaccinated. Well, Barbados has a new record in its daily number of COVID-19 cases, 342. The new positive cases were detected among the 1,706 tests conducted by the Best dos Santos Public Health Laboratory. These new cases include 164 males and 178 females. Of these, 82 people are under the age of 18 and 260 are 18 years and older. There are now 537 individuals in isolation facilities and 2,284 in home isolation. Now, in terms of vaccinations, 142,623 people have received first doses of the COVID-19 vaccines. A total of 113,022 people have had their second dose and are now fully vaccinated. Barbados has pushed the plight of small island developing states before the non-aligned movement. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Senator Dr. Jerome Walcott, has been highlighting the need for access to concessional financing and debt relief. Dr. Walcott is leading a Barbados delegation at a high-level commemorative meeting in Serbia. The two-day summit marks the 60th anniversary of the first conference held in 1961. That was also in Belgrade in former Yugoslavia. Senator Walcott told the forum the growth of SIDS is at stake.
We are calling repeatedly and stridently for access to concessional financing and debt relief, which will create enough fiscal space to safeguard the gains attained since independence and to ensure future resilient green economic growth. The current environment is particularly challenging for developing countries. We are being battered by a seemingly unending global pandemic, with little access to needed vaccines, and at the same time, our very existence is being threatened by the climate crisis. All vulnerabilities are being laid bare. All over the world there's suffering, turmoil and discontent. Global inequalities continue to be exacerbated.
During the event, Barbados recommitted itself to the ideals and principles of the non-aligned movement. Minister Walcott noted the principles of the group outlined 6 decades ago are even more relevant now.
Inter alia, independence and self-determination, peaceful coexistence, security, non-interference in the internal affairs of others, international cooperation, and the strengthening of the United Nations. These very principles are the foundation of Barbados' foreign policy, which our first Prime Minister characterized as friends of all, satellites of none. It is of course true to say that the world has changed tremendously over the past 60 years. Our countries, by dint of hard work and sacrifice, strive to attain adequate levels of economic and social development to ensure the well-being of our people. We sought to place democracy, good governance, and respect for human rights at the center of our free societies.
The youth of the world are united in their call for climate justice. That's the assessment from UNICEF youth advocate Ashley Lashley, who recently returned from the Youth for Climate event in Italy. She says young people understand the threat posed by climate change and are no longer willing to hold on to hope. Ms. Lashley also explains one of the main proposals emerging from the event.
One of the major issues and solutions that were brought forth at the summit as it relates to young persons engaging was that of climate education and seeking to have a massive sensitization awareness campaign implemented within their countries from a governmental perspective. That was one of the most important solutions that we brought forth within our framework to have climate education brought forth in our schools curriculum, and not only brought forth but to ensure that there's some sense or sort of financing as it relates to the facilitation of climate education within our schools.
Ms. Lashley told CBC News the youth want developed nations at the upcoming COP26 climate change conference to implement their commitments of $100 billion to developing nations. She also says young people in Barbados can get involved in the fight.
I believe that youth in Barbados can become more involved in climate action by first making themselves more aware about the impact climate change is having on our lives. I would urge youth to not wait till a disaster hit us to want to get involved in climate action, but to look around their communities and see the impact that climate change is having within their communities.
The development of the local black belly sheep industry is well underway as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security moves to construct a $300,000 feedlot. Consultant with the ministry, Dr. Leroy McLean, who is spearheading the project, told CBC News the facility being constructed at the Animal Nutrition Unit will house about 250 sheep. He says it's a project which the private sector can take over and scale up.
The idea of the feedlot is that small farmers would not have to rear a lamb from birth to the point of slaughter. But at about 12 weeks or so, 10 to 12 weeks, that lamb could be transferred to the feedlot where through intensive husbandry practices, it can now reach a point for slaughter in about 7 months. So instead of a farmer having to wait for over a year to get a lamb of reasonable size, we can now do it in about 7 months using the feedlot. So we're in the process of actually having a building constructed, just about completed.
Dr. McLean says the industry is now faced with many challenges, including losses to dog attacks. He believes the revival of the industry will significantly shrink the meat import bill.
There's one farmer who said that over a period of 3 months he lost 35 sheep, valued at approximately $300 each. So that is posing a significant problem for us. But we are trying to develop the industry because currently Barbados imports a very large quantity of meat from sheep, totaling some $14 million a year in the pre-pandemic years. So it is believed that we can significantly reduce this amount of money which we are spending on imports, and also that we could, in doing so, improve our food security.
Sports time now, and we head on over to the sports studio where Anne-Marie Burke is standing by. Anne-Marie, what's the big story tonight?
Well, good evening to you, Lisa. It's all about the West Indies team as bubble fatigue is real for West Indies players, and Captain Kieron Pollard has once again asked that people be sympathetic to their plight. He was speaking today after the Windies had their first training session following 6 days in quarantine in Dubai. Some players have had hectic schedules over the past couple of months with series against Pakistan and Australia before heading into the Caribbean Premier League and then the Indian Premier League.
This bubble life is very, very difficult at times. Guys would have moved, straight from playing the home series into CPL, then into an IPL bubble, then into a World Cup. Sometimes you need a break, as a cricketer, as an individual, and I don't think enough attention is actually being placed, on mental health, for sportsmen and us cricketers at this point in time with all this bubble. People tend to, try to use other narratives as to what is actually being said and how the individuals are being, purported and what is actually coming out of how they feel as individuals. And I think, as I always say, my statement is walk a day in our shoes and you'll understand. But, I think what persons see, on social media and they look forward to seeing in terms of performances, they don't take that other part into consideration.
Pollard was also quick to defend the players who were selected for the World Cup squad, saying they have a solid team with loads of experience.
A lot of guys are looking forward to this, World Cup. We haven't played a T20 World Cup since 2016. We're the defending champions, and I think we have a very, very good team in terms of, experience and, a couple of young guys and guys who are looking forward to, make their name in T20 cricket. Ruston Chase did pretty well, in the CPL, and he gets his opportunity now. Young Hayden Walsh get an opportunity to play, World Cup. We have the young Purans and the Hetmeyers, and these guys who are the future of West Indies cricket looking to go and perform. So, the rally behind us, that's the most that we can ask, as cricketers, because we know that we are going to give 100%. We, just like everybody else, we have sacrificed a lot and given a lot, to be in this position. And when we go out there, we're going to play for that personal pride. So if you believe that that's what we're going to do, we will welcome your support. If not, we welcome whatever you have for us as well. But we know when we put on our jersey, we're going to represent the millions of people around the Caribbean and try to bring justice and try to do well and bring back that trophy to the Caribbean.
In terms of playing conditions expected for the World Cup, the 38-year-old all-rounder says the Windies will have to be versatile.
We need to be good in all three facets of the game. I think the pitches in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah all give something different, and it's not going to be the same game plan, throughout on the three surfaces. So we need to be smart. We need to play smart cricket. We need to sometimes play the conditions, and we need to have the personnel or the right personnel at the right time in order to get that job done. So that's from a batting perspective, and from a bowling perspective, the same thing in terms of your variations, as a bowler. So it's a bit tricky, but the good thing is that, majority of our squad would have gotten an opportunity to be in the UAE. Some would have gotten some game time, some would not have, but we'll just try to work it out and see, how best we could, formulate the best game plan.
The Business Report, brought to you by the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, a department of the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment, supporting young entrepreneurs from idea to enterprise.
On tonight's Yes Business Report, the participants in the second cohort of the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme's business model Canvas get some timely and sound advice, and this as they get rewarded for their stellar work. It's all part of the Yes Entrepreneurial Development Program. Ryan Broom has the details.
In his remarks, manager of Yes, Ryan Mosley, says the Yes Business Model Canvas was conducted in September, with each participant given the opportunity to do a presentation of their business idea. He explains what else was involved.
The activity was one where persons got the opportunity to present their business ideas in a business canvas model setting, which is a one-page snapshot analysis of the business under the 9 components. It is almost like a mini business plan. When we were part of the session, we realized that persons would have been doing this for the first time. There were nerves, but nonetheless, the passion that we want to see came through. And as a result, we have 6 winners from the morning and evening session.
Mr. Mosley adds that all of the participants must be commended because in many cases it was the very first time they had to make that kind of presentation to a panel of judges.
For the first time in our history of the business canvas model, we actually had judges from within the region. Mr. Sherwin Bridgewater, who is from Trinidad, who would have facilitated a session with the CBC training model, which is a simulation similar to the business labs that we do, and Mr. Adrian Reed, who I think is stationed in Switzerland at this stage. So we had a regional and international flavor to the actual judging panel, and as we seek to facilitate this type of assistance and help, we trust that we would continue to grow and develop the service.
Meanwhile, in her remarks, speaking on behalf of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment Minister Dwight Sutherland, who was unable to attend, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, Yolande Howard, told the young people they have taken on a challenge to develop themselves as business people at a time in the island's history when we're dealing with a very serious public health crisis.
A lot of people, everyone really and truly has been touched by the negative effects of the pandemic. But what is very interesting though is the number of reports that have been coming out over the past year or so about persons who have either had businesses before the pandemic or who have developed businesses during the pandemic because of unemployment, either related to themselves or members of their families, and who have been able to thrive. And what that has demonstrated is that we have, I'm going to repeat some of the words Mr. Mosley said, drive, passion, but also resilience and determination.
She further told the participants that the approach to the world of work and business has changed significantly.
The COVID-19 pandemic just exacerbated the situation and escalated the need for us to really look at what the society needs, what the people need, what services can I provide, what products can I provide, what skills do I have that I can use to develop into a business venture. And it is really, for me, very heartening to see how a number of young persons especially have responded to the need to be able to look inwardly and really see what skills and talents they can bring to the fore to then convert into businesses.
And with that, it was time for the prizes to be awarded. Third prize in the morning group went to Regina Gibbs of Unlocked Beauty. Second prize went to Shadia Cobham of S is for Smooth, Silky, Seductive. And first prize went to Mia Homer for Print on Demand. Then in the evening group, third prize went to Jasmine Austin of Jasmine Originals, who was not present to collect her prize. Second prize went to Tamara Harewood for Flawless Blends. And first prize went to Rachel Blenman for Rogero's Concierge. Congratulations to all. For the Yes Business Report, I'm Ryan Brew.
The Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme has announced its new online series entitled Yespreneur, Get Equipped. The series aims to educate, empower and equip entrepreneurs. Topics include the mindset and wellness of an entrepreneur, social media marketing for my business, making my money work for me, networking, your network is your net worth, and being the best version of myself. Those interested can be part of the series every Monday between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., but they must log on by 5:45 p.m. To register, just visit the Division of Youth Affairs Facebook page, Instagram, or website for more information. Time for the second half in sports. We go back over to the sports studio. Anne-Marie, over to you.
Well, Lisa, I promise you news of our senior athletes as Barbados captured 2 silver and a bronze on yesterday's opening day of the track and field program at the 34th Huntsman Senior Games in Utah, USA. Roland Waite won silver in the men's 65 to 69 200 meters, an event he won at his last outing at the Games back in 2019. Tomorrow he will compete in the 100 and 400 meter finals. Meanwhile, it was also a silver for Betty Ann Murray in the women's 70 to 74 50 meters. She also copped bronze in the 200 meters at what is her first outing at the Games. Tomorrow she will run in the final of the women's 100 meters. With Ann Murray are the only two athletes competing at the Games for Barbados, which despite the ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic has seen over 10,000 senior athletes across 28 disciplines. The Games have returned after being cancelled in 2020.
And that's our news tonight. But before we go, just a reminder to continue following us here on TV8. You can get more news on our social media platforms. We're on Instagram at CBC News Barbados and Facebook at cbcnews.bb, as well as our radio stations 947, 100.7 FM and 98.1 The One. That's news. Good night.
Thanks for visiting us. To get more stories like this one, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.